Good morning. I've been working on this for hours now as far as what I'm now calling Phase 4 because I really got to get to these supply and demand lines, which will become Phase 3 first. That has to come before we could do the other one. And I'll still work on this other one, but we have to throw these lines in here. So until I'm able to get something automatic, which I still have some things working on, but in the meantime, I'm thinking we could use what I've used before that I showed you in that other video with the barrier bar when I used them in the ATR strategy. And basically they are just supply and demand lines that stay under or above. I don't know, I suppose you could mix them, but that might throw things off. So I don't know about that, but in any event, so the supply line is up on top and the demand line is down here. And the moral of the story is wherever you set this, there's going to be a zone, and I call it the no trade zone around there. All right, so what I have here with the no trade zones is something I've used before in the past, and basically it's going to do 50. I have a default of whatever it is. I'll just put it on here. So what I would do is I would create a zone like this. So if we put in the settings 50 ticks, it would be 50 ticks on either side of this zone. And of course, if we said 20 ticks, then it would be 20 ticks. So the whole thing would be 40 ticks, and that's the zone. And so basically what that is, I call it the no trade zone. And that is, as price gets into this zone, we don't want to take any trades. What I have in my other strategy is something like this. It just trails on the current edge right there. So it'll be something like that. And it could say use the same colors and everything else. So it looks, so it's just a little visual. So what I have here for the settings is I got the black ones are the current ones and the green ones are the new ones. So supply demand is on by default. I'm just starting, I don't know what the no trade zone size will be, but that would be a total of 60 ticks, 30 on each side. And then moving down here in this area, I just put the color is blue. That would be the same color as the no trade zone for the supply, and orange red for the demand zone, same as the no trade zone. And then the width, the style, and both plots, supply and demand, will be allowed there if acceptable. So we'll just share the same settings for that. Keep them uniform. So anyway, that's as price comes down here. Of course, this would move along as price goes on. But once we get into this zone, it would stop plotting. So we're going here, everything's fine. Well, it didn't plot anyway, so it's okay. But anyway, like this one right here, though, I mean, these could plot the high and the low and all that, but it's just not going to take any trades. So no audibles, no entry zone, nothing like that. I mean, so the high, low, and all that could stay just for visual because it's not doing anything. But we don't want to see any. Well, I guess I don't have any. We don't want to have one. Well, if I did this, so if it were like this, it would not plot. So as you're coming along, you're going along, it could plot here, the lower low, but we would not plot this zone. It would be off. And then it would resume again once there. Now it would be able to plot again if it's eligible. So something like that. Once we're able to identify these, then I can go to the next phase. We'll see how that goes. So I don't know. It's just kind of a work in motion. I'm not quite sure. That's where I'm not there yet. So kind of jumping the gun here a little bit. But anyway, so yeah, let's just leave it there. Give me your thoughts. Again, I don't know where I'm going with this just yet. It's a little premature. So I wanted to run with this for a while and see where this is going. But I do have that the price direction or supply and demand, all that business. I started it, but that can come later. All right, you asked. I'm gonna give you a little. I'll do the presentation. I'm trying to put something together. Hold on a minute. Let me get it out. So here we're talking about, you know, the higher highs, higher lows, the pivots, which you're all too familiar with. And then there's also the gap, which is a small direction. Either one of these are goes, if you will, for an entry. All right, so the pivot high, I'm going to breeze through this real quick. So you got the high pivots, the low pivots. That's going to determine, and when you get a couple of them together, then that's the go, and we already have that. And then there it defines the when it triggers as a long, there it would go in the uptrend. That's a pivot uptrend. The gap uptrend, you haven't really talked a lot about that, but anyway, these are trigger lines in there, and just the moving averages and whatnot. But needless to say is this is what we call the gap, because the two of these are separate. Once they start getting inside of each other, little things change a little bit. So you can see that we want to jump in on that one there. For discussion of supply and demand using multiple time frames, we'll refer to using the up or down trends, whether it be the pivot or the gap, you know, once it's formed. So we're just going to pretend we have all that. We're not going to go into how we got it. We just got it. So you got your supply and your demand. This is just a single chart. You know, we're not involving multiple time frames. We're not getting there yet. That's totally something bigger. This is just strictly a single chart. So you come down to a demand area that you've recognized as a demand area, and it sets up for a long. So, and it's in the demand ladder. So that's trade number one. Now, as you're going along, it messes around in the midpoint, and it turns into chop and goes back and forth. Usually it will follow the direction of the trend, and once it breaks through all that chop, it will go up to the supply area that it's trying to fill these orders. So once it chops through all those moving averages and whatnot, it breaks through, and then it continues, goes. That's trade number two. When we get to the top, we have trade number three. Now, we're assuming that our pivots, our gap, whatever it might be, has set up to go long. So, but we are at supply. So that's going to be 3A, because we're still approaching supply. And I talked about this no trade zone, because those are a little difficult. Now we're right at the area. Do we really want to go long? Even though we have a setup, we really don't want to go long right there because we haven't broken through it. So now once it eats up all those orders and it decides it wants to go, okay, here's the gap trade lifestyle. Okay, so you can see right here, you know, you've got that first one, that one, and then there's the two. You see how it's starting to get, now here's number three. It did break above. So we do have a gap there officially. However, we're right at the supply. So do we really want to, you know, do that right there? So let me go back to where I was. So that's what I was saying. That's 3A. Now, once we go to and break out of that, that's where we get the 3B. Once we chew that away, very similar to 2, is that once we chew through that supply that supply area, and we break above it, then we're okay to go long again. And basically, we just start the cycle all over again. The 3B becomes a 1, and we go from there. And, you know, basically, the supply becomes the demand, or the ceiling becomes the floor. We've heard all that before. And we continue the whole system again. And so there we go with 1 again, and that's it. So identifying these is what we need to do based on supply and demand. So wherever those lines are on supply and demand, this one here, you notice it changed. It was a supply, but now it's a demand. But we have to be able to recognize those, and that'll be done automatically through Helix. But for right now, I'm just using the manual lines, those horizontal lines that we just talked about. So let's continue forward just so you can get an idea where we're going with this. So now we didn't break through, okay? So now we got under it, and now we're starting to short. So again, we're here in the supply. This is number 4. Now we have a short sell, okay? So basically it's just the opposite of the long, but it's turned into a short gap or a pivot, a pivot, a downtrend. So it's rather a downtrend or a gap fill, whatever the case is. It's a lower gap, and we're under supply. So that's number 4, and that's going to be the most powerful one, because look at all the distance we have to go. So now the next one is a downtrend. We're in a downtrend, and we have a down gap or a down pivot, and so that's trade number 5. And then, of course, the same thing. We go into 6A, but we're right into the demand. So do we really want to take that short right there? Even though it's set up, we might have a gap, or we might have the pivots that create a short trend. But do you really want to do it is the question. So that's going to be the 6A. And then, of course, if we break through it and get on the other side of it, then we're at 6B. And then basically we're starting all over again with which a 4 then. This would become the supply again. This would become from blue to red, or would turn from the floor to the ceiling, and then we'd start 4 all over again. And that's the life cycle of the trade, and we just go down from there. So that kind of sums it up very quickly without wasting too much time on how that would work. So this is group 1. So Helix has 7 time frames within it, and they're all identified as groups. So as I said with this one, we had 1. So now this is group 1, 1, group 1, 2, group 1, 3A, and group 1, 3B, and so on and so on. All I did is just throw the group on top of them. And that's all it is. So when we start getting into the bigger, and so that's where we're going with the supply, and that's just a single primary time frame. If you go into bigger and better, you go into multi-time frames, and as I said, there's 7 time frames in Helix. So for the sake of discussion, we'll just use 2 time frames. This, group 1 and group 2 to make it simple. But you can see here, this is the same thing, same scenario, only this is group 2. So group 2, 1, group 2, 4, etc., etc. Same thing. It's just identified from a different higher time frame, or we call it, the synthetic time frame. So we could have, even though your primary chart might be a 5-minute chart, your synthetic time frame maybe, let's say, is a 60-minute chart. So if you have so let's say group 2 is a 60-minute chart, and group 1, your primary chart, is a 5-minute chart. You could see that we need to be able to identify group 1 from group 2, even though they're all the same based on supply and demand and whatnot, but we need to identify them. And then as we go further and deeper into it, so right now, like say, for instance, you have multiple time frames. So the multi-time frame, over here you have the higher time frame. So, here's your demand, and then there's your supply up here, okay? So this is the higher time frame, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. We're just going to say that it's a synthetic higher time frame over here. And then the one moving to the right, like you would read a book, going to this way. Now when you want to fine tune the area, you come in here. And so just to kind of put it in perspective here, this area down here is this area here, and this whole run up takes it to here. And so you can see on a smaller time frame, you're bebopping back and forth like that. And then this move down is this area here. So moving quite fast here, and because this is really not done yet, but we're going to identify based on the multi-time frame locations. So for instance, what I mean by that, let's say we want to go long. Okay, so let's label these as far as what they are. Now, we already said down at the bottom, it's going to be group 1. 1 is going to be the, down here, group 1, 1. And over here, it's group 2, 1. Starting from left to right, if you will, like you're reading a book, you look at the bigger time frame chart and you say, I'm at demand here. And then we look over here and we have the same thing over here. We're in the group, so we're in our area and we've got our long. So that's the best trade to get in. I could go back to show you the picture of the gap trade again, but this is where you want to get in. Okay. So this is going to be identified as group 1, 1, group 2, 1. Make sense? Moving forward. So we look at our chart. Now we're in the middle. We're between supply and demand. Now, it's going to go messing around here in the center and wiggling around. But the moral of the story is it will normally follow the path that it's already in, to follow the trend once it breaks and sets up. So we're looking at this area here. And so that now we're here on the smaller time frame chart. And on the smaller time frame chart, typically the primary chart, you have your long. You got your setup, your trend, whether the pivot or the gap, and you've got it. So knowing that it's going to follow the trend, typically, well, if it doesn't have to, but typically it's going to follow the trend. So what would this one be called? Well, we said earlier that on the higher time frame, 2, and then we look over here, and it is a 1. So this is a 1, group 1, 1, because it's the same as the one down here. And it's the same as the one here, and the same as the one here. It's a 1. But the location on the higher time frame is over here. It's a 2. So this is going to be a group 1, 1 gap trade or pivot trade uptrend. And then it's going to be a group 2, number 2. So that's the identification of it. And there's a whole matrix that goes with this. And you can imagine if we had 7 time frames, but right now we're just dealing with 2. Okay, so moving on here. So now we're at supply, and you know we have our setup that is going into it. So we have a gap, or again the upper the pivots, and it's the uptrend says we're going to go up. It went that direction. So what is this one called? Well, we obviously know it's a group 1, 1 because we're going into it. However, over here, it's going to be a 3A. So a group 2, 3A. So can you take this trade? It's set up. It's in a long trend. It's created a gap trade. But would you want to? It could certainly go up, no doubt about it. It very well could. However, the chances and the likelihood are not as strong. So that's where this no trade zone kind of comes into play, is that we really don't want these because they're too close here. Now they could break, and if they do break, then obviously we'll start all over again and reevaluate it because the supply becomes demand and we go from there. But let's assume it goes down from here. Well, what's this one called? So we're looking here, and now we're in a down trade. We've got the downtrend here, and we're going down. So again, this is a gap short, so it's just the reverse. So it's a gap short, that's why it's red. So it's a gap short, and we're at a supply area. So this would be a great short because of the fact the chances that it continues to go down are strong. So now we have, we're going down here, and we have a short gap or a short trend, pivot trend, and it says there. So we have a number 4 there. So group 1, 4, and we have a group 2, 5, because we're not up here. We're like in the center here. So that's kind of, we're far enough away. I mean, maybe you can't tell on this one. Maybe I should have it down a little further, but you know, whatever. It's far enough away from that supply. So that's why we're like in between the 2. That's why it's a 5 and not a 4. Then we go on to the next one, and now it turns. Okay, so now we get let's, whether or not we get stopped or not, it doesn't matter. The point of it is we now get a gap up. So we now have a, what would that be? A group 1, 1, because it's a long. But here we're still in that same area that we talked about. So that's going to be a group 1, 1 and a group 2, 5, because we're in the center, but we're going up. If that makes sense. We're in a downtrend over here. We're still in it now. If this turns around and over here, if this were over here, we would be basically a number 2 again. This would be a group 2, 2, but we're coming in, we're still in a downtrend, and we have not turned in this trend yet. So we are in a downtrend. So, you know, again, it all goes by probabilities. Can it continue to go up like here? Sure, it could. You know, we don't know that yet. So we're right here. All we know is we're in a downtrend here, which is a group 5, you know, group 2, 5, and we're going down, and this one's saying go up, and we're near supply. Is that something that we want to do? You know, anything can happen, but that's where we're at. Anyway, hopefully this will give you a little, I'm still, you know, working on this, and yeah, I'm not done with it. So it just keeps going, but this hopefully will give you a little introduction of, you know, where we're at. So I'm going to leave it here and keep this video short. All right, thanks.